Extinction Rebellion. Too radical or rational? The group was set up in 2018 due to a realisation that there had been a complete failure by governments to acknowledge the unfolding climate and ecological crisis. In less than a year, around 300 groups had sprung up in the UK alone, and with every march that number continues to grow. The very nature of the group represents a democracy, building a movement that is participatory and decentralised. This is exemplified in their third demand, which focuses on the decision-making of civil society. The powerless can collectively come together through a citizens' assembly where they are able to determine the future of our world.
Being radical involves advocating for drastic social change. Environmental activism is becoming more dynamic and political, intersecting in complex ways with policy processes, knowledge production, and insider expertise. One way Extinction Rebellion exercises radical action is through civil disobedience. This type of action may be less palatable to the public and decision makers, however, it may not be as irrational as it seems. Being rational involves reacting to something using reason or logic. Extinction Rebellion are using science to demand state-led policy action. According to Ernst-Jan Kupier, governments have broken the unwritten social contract by not responding to the climate crisis.
The social contract has been broken.
And therefore they are putting our lives and future generations at risk. So if the contract is broken, why should we abide by their rules?
We can't save the world by playing by the rules.
How radical action leads to transformation and justice. Ernst-Jan Kupier talks of how we desperately need to gain the attention of governments who are doing nothing to combat the climate crisis. He states that there are two conditions for a successful rebellion: that the rebellion is disruptive enough to daily lives that it captures the attention of elites, and that it remains non-violent. It is perhaps the disruptive, non-conventional nature of radical protest action in XR that allows those without power to be heard through the channels of mass media. As Della Porta notes, public demonstrations and disruptive direct actions are the protest group's most effective mechanism to attract public attention. The generation of headlines forces those in power to observe this radical action and hopefully provokes transformation. Within the context of climate change, transformation is a complex process that necessitates changes at personal, cultural, organisational, institutional and systems levels. Attention to radical attempts towards transformational adaptation are vital in a world where climate change mitigation is not occurring at a rate that will stop serious detrimental impacts for people. Perhaps rational action no longer even scrapes the surface of the degree of change that is necessary to mitigate climate change effects. Radical action is now imperative for any kind of transformation to justice. O'Brien and Singer state that climate change calls for new, or in this case radical, understandings of transformation that challenge fundamental beliefs and assumptions about the way that change comes about or is created. Practical and personal action interacts with political decision-making in a new way.
Globally, more radical ideas are being frequently adopted to respond to environmental justice issues. In Ecuador, the concept of buen vivir, which can be translated to good living, has been incorporated into their constitution and their national development plans. It uses underlying principles of inclusion and equity to limit current models of development through decolonial thought.
Is radical action the way to go, or is it a step backwards? It could be said that radical direct action, such as seen in the case of XR, is the only way to recognise the urgency of the climate crisis to prompt a transformation towards environmental justice. However, it is easy to criticise these radical movements as going too far in so much as actually alienating the people that the movements aim to win over. Progress towards the changes to institutional systems that are necessary to create transformation are perhaps undone due to the unruly and disruptive tactics that XR champions. Instead of opening up a productive dialogue of transformation with political decision makers, this could just lead to backward steps in terms of the public opinion of such movements and their regard in political spheres. A balance needs to be found between disruptive, effective radical action and collaborative, productive conversations in order to reach transformation. Or perhaps what past failures and the science of the urgency of climate change is telling us is that maybe the actions of XR are no longer radical, but in fact rational. They are now the only way to go.